you the copies. Second paragraph on the top of the page, we were talking about that there are two levels of parnasa. There's a level of parnasa, which that is the level of geula, it's higher than geula, and that's similar to what we have in our parsha, that there has to be a level of amelim b'Torah, a level of toiling in Torah to be able to attain it. And the mitzvahs are in a way that's done in the ultimate fashion. Then there's a basic level. There's a level of parnasa, which is lower than geula. That's why Nisan is higher than Tishrei, because Nisan is the level of geula, and Tishrei is a level that that the person's sustenance is apportioned and set aside for him from Rosh Hashanah. And this is the level, the lower level that we say in the second parsha in Krishma, only by V'hoyim Shemaya Tishmu. You don't have to have Amelim B'Torah. You don't have to do the mitzvosai Tishmuru in the greatest way. It's just ordinary mitzvahs, as long as you're not Vesartem, as long as you're not turning away. That's also fine in the Avodah. So he's going to explain now what is this level, this connection between the Amelim B'Torah, this higher level of service of Hashem, which brings about the level of Parnasa, Nosati Geshmichem Beitam, Geshamim, as identified with Parnasa, that's higher than the ordinary level of Geula, and higher than the lower level of Parnasa. Again, second paragraph in Ois Gimel, page 387. Yes, Lahagdim Tchilo, we have the first preface, it's explained in the Hemshech of Samachvav, that over there he asks the classic, he asks among the classic questions on this parsha, the L'churei, the modern, seemingly it's not understood much of possible in B'chokais Telechu Goyim. Nosati Geshmichem Beitam. What it says, if you will go in my chukim, and I will give you the rains in their times. But no, the earth will give forth its produce. And the tree of the field will give forth its fruits and so on. The same question that the Rebbe Rashab asks on Bechukosai also applies in the second parsha of Krishma. Also, what it says, if you will listen, I will give you the rains of your land. This was already a covenant, a promise that Hashem made in the appearance of the rainbow. The Amar that Hashem said about the rainbow, that it will remind him, when you see a lisker b'Yisraelim, I will see the rainbow to remember the everlasting promise. The Hainu, and what is that promise? There'll be an ongoing existence for the Hashpah, that has to come down into all the worlds, meaning that the worlds will get their sustenance and energy for all time. That's what it says. Never again will all the days of the earth, which is sowing and harvesting, will it cease. Summer and winter, day and night, will not cease. All of that includes it includes also the idea that I will place the rains of your land. After the you will gather your grain, you will gather your wine, you will gather your oil. So if so, what are we saying? That when you do Torah mitzvahs, you'll get it, and if you don't, not. It's already promised from the times of Noach. It's impossible that this promise, this covenant, should ever cease. Even heaven forbid, if Yidden would not do Torah mitzvahs. Therefore, we have to understand the linkage in our parsha that he says, why does it say, if you'll go in my chukim, then you will have all of this. We were promised this from the times of Noach. Hashem doesn't go back on his word. The idea behind this is, this is a given that the world goes on because of this promise that Hashem made to Noach. We still need the fulfillment of mitzvahs. Why? What is the fulfillment of mitzvahs assure? Kimitzada Christus Bris nimmt rak Chais bekiyama olam kipi amidak tzuva shalus tukvar meseder ishtalshus. The promise, the covenant that Hashem made with Noach was only that basic existence that's necessary, the life and the existence of the world, according to the measure that was already established in Seder Ishtalshus, that the world should continue existing, that the world will not cease like it was in the times of Mabel. The season ceased completely. Night and day even ceased completely. The whole running of the world stopped its normal running. So that's going to go on. The normal world is going to go on whether or not a person does Torah mitzvahs. But through fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs comes down a new light in an additional way, more than the principle. In other words, the principle is the basic existence of the world, and this light ensures that it should be even much more than that type of hamshacha, but it should come down much more than the basics. So he says, over the basic and the principle that was already established in Seder Ishtalshus, it's going to come down through Torah mitzvahs. Then the Rebbe adds another component. The truth is, Torah mitzvahs is also necessary for the basics, not just for higher than Seder Ishtalshus. He says, "Ube'emes in truth, in a gam b'shvil amshach zachayis b'kiyam ma'il v'shar parhuksa b'Seder Ishtalshus, even for the sake of the drawing down the life force and the existence of the world the way it was already established. In Seder Ishtalshus, yesh tzoyrach b'kiyam mitzvahs, there's a need to fulfill mitzvahs. Even that which came down at the beginning of creation, because Hashem desires kindness, meaning He does it only on His kindness. There's no earning it. We don't have to earn it. It's just a kindness of Hashem. Even the basic things come down now by the inspiration down here below through the avoid of Yidden fulfilling Torah mitzvahs. That is what came about by Matan Torah, that the system that was put into place, that the world can exist on its own, independent of Avodah, was upturned by Matan Torah. That from Matan Torah, everything needs to come down through the service. And then the Rebbe adds another thing that's specific. Kuntus and Mayin says there's a by specific linkage between the life force of a Yid and his avodah. In the previous Maimer, he also mentioned the Kuntus and Mayin of the Rebbe Rashab in passing. He didn't quote exactly what the Kuntus and Mayin says. And over here also he mentions it, but I'll be on the board, but Kuntus and Mayin especially, according to what the Rebbe Rashab explains in the Kuntus entitled Mayon. Their channel for every type of life force and energy must go through Torah mitzvahs. Torah mitzvahs is the vehicle, the channel for them. The world as a whole maybe could exist without the Torah mitzvahs, but a Yid to be able to receive his highest must be channeled through Torah mitzvahs. That's the explanation for the question that we asked at the beginning of the page. And that's why it says, if you will listen, like we say in the second parsha of Krishma, then I will give you the reins of your land. And the same thing, what we learned in this week's parsha, if you'll go on my chukim, I will give you your reins in their times. I knew this means also the idea of reins and making a living totally b'kiyam Torah mitzvahs dafka depends specifically on the fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs. But now, once we've established that there's a linkage and a connection between the fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs and Parnasa, so now we can go on to the next step. The type of Parnasa, the type of rain, the level of it is also dependent upon our level of Torah mitzvahs. Depending on what level of Torah mitzvahs we do, that's the type of level that the Parnasa is going to be, that the Gashmis become Shoktzak. Bottom of the page. Looking this itself, this type of linkage that by Yid, the Hamshach of Parnas is dependent upon his Torah mitzvahs. It's also dependent, according to his avodah, that's how the Hamshach of Parnas is going to come down. And you know, the idea behind this is the Parsha Shnei, the Geshmichem, in the second Parsha Geshmichem, it says, top of the page, next page, it will be when you will listen, you will serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. It's not mentioned the idea of with all your might, like it says in the first Parsha Krishma. It says, and in the second Parsha, he leaves out the idea of B'chol Meidecha. The Abrazal concerning this, the Chazal said, Chazal called the second Parsha of Krishma, that the first Parsha of Krishma, Yidden are doing the will of Hashem, they're fulfilling the will of Hashem, and the second Parsha, they're not fulfilling the will of Hashem. The simple meaning of this Maimer Chazal is because of what it says later in Vahayim Shemaya, where it goes on to speak about if Yidden will not fulfill it, whereas in the first parsha it doesn't talk about it. But according to Chassidus, the very fact that it's missing B'chol Meidecha, so you do not have the Oisir Ritzayin Shemakim, it's brought down Chassidus. You do not have creating Hashem's will, because to create Hashem's will, that you need to have the avodah B'chol Meidecha, as we can explain. Even though you're serving Hashem, so you're doing Torah mitzvahs. We're talking about. The person is doing Torah mitzvahs. But since the avodah is only measured and has a boundary, not with all your might. That Chassidus always explains that ma'oid means blegal without boundary, going out of the boundaries. Therefore, the level is and because it's a limited form of avodah, he's doing everything right. All the boxes have been checked, but it's limited. Therefore, the parnasa is also in that type of way. By day avodah through such type of avodah where it's limited. So the parnasa comes down only from the level of the chain order of descent alone. That's only the external union, like we said before. It's not the inner union that draws down from higher than Seder Ishtalshlus. It's only Chokmah Bina coming together the way they're in Seder Ishtalshlus, not tapping into higher. To be able to draw down from Parnasa. That's from the level that's higher than Seder Ishtalshlus, from this inner union, until it comes down from Hashem's very essence. For this, we want to draw down from Hashem's essence. We want to draw down from above and beyond any limitations. So our avodah has to be correspondingly beyond limitations. That's the idea with all your might, beyond the boundaries of the soul powers, whether it is whether we're dealing with the inner soul powers like the Vidas and Seichel, whether we're dealing beyond the boundaries of the transcendent soul powers like will and delight. This idea of going beyond the powers of the soul, that is a way of davening. There's ahava, that's b'chol avavcha, b'chol nafshcha, and then there's ahava, that's the davening in a way of b'chol meidach. What is a corresponding level of that going beyond boundaries in learning Torah? In Torah study, that's the toiling and effort that a person puts to Torah. That's going beyond boundaries, and therefore it will draw down the parnasa that's beyond boundaries. By days, through the toil and Torah, we draw down the infinite. Explained the many the Hemshach of Tav Samachvav, and also in the Maimer title on this week's parsha, B'chais Telechu. Goydel Milos Hagiba Torah, the Rebbe Shab and Tav Samachvav explains the great advantage of toiling in Torah. How does he explain it? According to the Zohar statement. And the pasuk there it says that Hashem does for those that await Him. So the Zohar gives an interesting explanation to Mechakeloi. Leman the dochkin b'milde chachmasa, those that push themselves. So in other words, they toil very strongly in matters of wisdom in the Torah. So this is the Rebbe Rashabarei says the great advantage based on the Zohar of Torah study in a way of toil. Now the Rebbe adds to this, we get out from miles, say give the advantage of toiling and effort in Torah. Shai days and Mamshichim Kines Ablik, through that we draw down Hashem's infinite. Is also hinted in what Chazal say concerning the toil of Torah, called Adam Lamon Divra. Every person was born to toil. Adam Lamon Yulad Kanasifal, that a person was born to toil, like we had in the first Isa this Maimon. The toil is connected specifically with birth. What, like says Amal Yulad, what's the idea of birth connection with toil? By the Indian, the idea of birth is just like total renewal of something from nothing. So it's only in the power of the infinite. The very essence of the emanator that Hashem's very existence comes from Himself. He's not a result of some prior cause that preceded Him, heaven forbid. Only He has the capability and the power to create something from total nothingness and mamish without any prior cause that preceded this yesh, because just like He has no prior cause, He can create something without a prior cause. Like it's explained at length in the Mamorim, the Rebbe Rashab said by the Chasna and the Sheva Brachas of his son, the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he explains over there that the idea of birth, that's also something from nothing, and it's a revelation of the infinite power of Hashem down here below. So therefore, birth is this power of the infinite. So la'amal yulad, toil brings the idea of birth. Toil brings a level that's higher than, say, the shtalshus, which we manifest in birth. Now we can understand why in our parsha the emphasis is on toiling in Torah, because we're talking about a reward, a level of parnasa that's higher than, say, the shtalshus, which can only be reached when I go outside of myself. So, that's what it means. You should toil in Torah. This means shall limit our Torah by and shall the studies, Torah studies in a way it's beyond measure and boundary. Moving from this understood, if the Torah study is beyond measure and boundary, so Torah leads to mitzvahs. So the mitzvahs reflect that as well. Moving from this understood, Shagam Kima mitzvahs, so by Shalom did the fulfillment of mitzvahs is also beyond measure and boundary. This is the reason why it seems to repeat. It says, you will observe my mitzvahs and you will do them. So what's the two things, observance and doing? This means not just the actions of the mitzvahs and doing them. Like it says, the tishmero hints also that you have the appropriate thoughts and appropriate intention. Let's explain in Tanya that when it says a good thought, Hashem, it connects it to action. It's referring on a very deeply concealed level of love that's only felt in his mind or in the depth of his heart, even though you worked on bringing it out. And their level is very high and totally removed from action. So therefore, how are they going to connect with the action, which is the whole point? The Av of a year have to impact and to join with the action. So Hashem joins it. Hashem joins them to the action. So when I have the Vasisa, plus I have the Tishmero, I have the Kavon, I have the Av of a year, though it might be something removed from the action world, then you're going out of your boundaries. So then the parnasa is beyond boundaries. Because when when the avoid is in such a manner as I got, then the drawing down of making a living is from a level that's beyond measure and boundaries of the chain order of descent. That's why it says that if you'll go my chukim, I will give you the reins. Specifically, not through a messenger. I'm the one that's giving them. Therefore, it down here below, it reflects in the fact that the type of parnasa is not just a natural parnasa, but beyond the limitations of nature. That's the idea that the wheat, the kernels of wheat will be as big as kidneys. Can also follow also barren trees will give fruits, because the natural world is not a barrier, because we're drawing down something beyond nature, because my avoid is about going beyond myself. It says, no, it's downward being these two ways of parnasa, one in Seder Ishtalshus, one limited, and one beyond Seder Ishtalshus, totally miraculous, and that's reflected in the rains. Is also to be found in rains, in the inner idea of the rains, the spiritual idea of rains. The idea of Torah is called rain as well. You move about the Torah, like it's brought down by the Torah, in the Kras Geshem, the Torah is called rain. It's not just also, it starts from Torah. The beginning of all matters begins from the internal level, from the spiritual level. Afterwards, it descends by a chain descent also into the physical. Especially in our case. So there should be able to be that I gave you the rates. Specifically, I, like we said, from Hashem himself, beyond the Shliach, I'm the one that's giving them. Should come from I. It's similar to what it says, I who I am, that was not hinted in any letter, in any point in top of the letter. So it should come down from that highest, most level. How does it come down from that utmost, highest level to be literal rain? The only way to bridge that gap is you need to have Torah. Torah, which is the spiritual idea of the rain, connects that highest, most level to the physical rain down here. There has to be an intermediary between them. Not Torah, that's the idea of Torah. The Torah is an intermediary between the Creator and the created being. Even higher, the Torah is between it's an intermediary between the emanator and the emanated beings, meaning between Hashem, who's higher than Atzilus, and the world of Atzilus. The emanator is the higher than the 10 spheres. That is in the way of a boundary. 10 spheres is limited. Especially the way the 10 spheres are in Atzilus, they're very limited. 10 and not 9, 10 and not 11. It comes down not just from the emanator, but even higher than the unlimited light. Any type of light is a revelation. When you say revelation, that's already contrary to something else. It's already limited, it's revelation and not concealment. But the true revelation is coming from a level beyond any type of limitation whatsoever. So Torah acts as the intermediary to connect the emanator and higher than the emanator with the emanated things and with the physical world. Like the Frierdiker Rebbe explains in the pasuk, he wraps his light like a tunic. So he says this is referring to Torah. That Torah has two levels: the level of the light of Torah and the level of a garment of Torah. The koyal of Torah, referring to Torah, is that which Hashem wraps himself in to bring down the Amshachas down here below. The Torah is an intermediate level, and therefore every intermediary must have in it two components. Every intermediary is made up of two levels. The intermediary has first the last level of the one above, and another part of intermediary is and has the first level of the lower level. And therefore these two combined becomes the intermediary in two levels. Based on Madregas, Erva Salma, this is the two levels in Torah of light and tunic. What is it, the two levels? We engalish the Torah, the revealed part of Torah is the garment part of Torah. Upanimis Torah, and the inner part of Torah, that's the light part of Torah. These are the two levels of the reigns, the way it's in Torah, Galia the Torah, the revealed part of Torah, Pnimis Torah, and the inner part of Torah, which is the two levels of Parnasa in the physical sense. There is the limited Parnasa, and there's the level that's higher than say the Rishbal. Top of page 390, Ois Hey, but this also be understood the level of the Rashbi. It was a very high level. His master told him, it's sufficient that I and your creator recognize your power because he was so much higher than everyone else and no one else could appreciate who he was. Why was he so high? Because his Torah was his profession. He was both involved in the revealed part of the Torah and the hidden part of the Torah together. Behind this means the secrets of the Torah was by him in a state of revelation and a way of understanding, comprehension. In such a manner that also studying the revealed part of the Torah was in a way of drawing down the inner light and that which was closed up. He actually saw in the simple halachas, in the physical halachas, he saw their spiritual corresponding level above. In this regard, the Rashbi's quality was higher than the rest of the Tanaim, not only was it greater than the Tanaim, that their involvement was either Nigla or Pnimius, whereas he had both, but also he had an advantage over those Tanaim that are involved in both the revealed part of Torah and the inner part of Torah, because he had the advantage that he combined both of them and he saw in the Nigla the Pnimis HaTorah. Kashas and connected to the Hill Parish said in the name of Rabbi Isaac Hamler that heard it from the Alter Rebbe in the presence and in the existence and the mindset of the great Neshamas like Rashbi, the entire Beis HaMikdash was not destroyed. They experienced the spirituality of the time of the Beis HaMikdash also after the destruction. How come? The idea of the Beis HaMikdash is that in the Beis HaMikdash was the revelation of Hashem's very essence. It's a Gilead by the Rashbi. It's shown the revelation of Hashem's essence in the Torah study because he joined the inner part of the Torah with the revealed part of the Torah. The Rebbe goes on, since Torah is the intermediary, that through it comes down the Hamshach in the world, like we said in Ois Daled. So this advantage of Rashbi and Torah study comes down also in the matter of making a living. That the Rashbi's type of parnasa comes down beyond the chain order of descent. Therefore, Rashbi holds after it's possible that a person is going to plow in the time of plowing and he's going to sow in the time of sowing. Then Torah Mateola, what's going to be with the Torah? On the other hand, you're going to ask, so how am I going to make a living? You know how you're going to make a living? When Yidden are doing the will of Hashem, we said before, doing the will means going beyond Seder Ishtalshlus, going in a way of toiling in Torah in a way beyond limitations. Their work is done by others. And like it says, that foreigners will arise and they will take your sheep out to graze. This means right there, that the Rashbi manifested that through Torah study, it would affect the physical world as well. It wasn't about negating the physical. That the drawing down the physical is in a way it's beyond nature. That's the most highest level in making a living, like we said in Nice Gimel. That's also what we find concerning the Rashbi. and his son Rabbi Elazar, when they were in the cave, a miracle occurred. It was created for them a carob tree and a spring, so they should be able to have what to drink. Their parnasa was in a miraculous way. Why? Because since their Torah study was totally beyond Seder Ishtalshlus, therefore they had it expressed in the physical world that their parnasa was awesome that way. And also to note from the discussion in the words of the Achronim, how did they eat immediately from the carob tree? They weren't concerned about Arlo. We know that the first 3 years of a tree, you can't eat any of its fruits. What did they eat the first 3 years? If they had this miraculous carob tree, one of the answers for this is this came from the heavens in a way of a miracle. And nothing impure comes down from the heavens. So therefore, this carob tree was totally and completely holy and pure and miraculous, and therefore it was they were able to eat from it immediately. It didn't have the din of. We'll stop over here and conclude the mimer on Monday.